As Alexandria said, it's going to be a big week coming up. Both Senator Scott and Governor DeSantis expecting to throw their hats into the ring. For more on this, let's go to Princeton University political scientist Lauren Wright. So Lauren, great to see you. Let's start with Senator Scott. I mean, he has such a compelling story. He is the most prominent black conservative elected official in the nation. And we heard him talk about victimization and this sort of thing. What do you expect him to run on, and how can his message resonate?
I mean, you're absolutely right. He has a very compelling personal story. He has a compelling record, especially as being a business-friendly candidate that worked well with the Trump administration and is seen as sort of the backbone of some of those economic policies. But the very, very difficult part of this, Eric, the crux of the issue is how do you get from 2%, where Tim Scott is in most polls right now, to 30 or 40%, or a place where you can compete with Trump. And frankly, the more of these candidates that jump into the race, the better for President Trump, because it divides the field and it actually benefits the more established candidates. So Tim Scott has a great story. You're absolutely right, but a lot of ground to cover.
He has been preaching unity and hope and redemption, for example. Is that a message? Would that resonate with the Trump base, for example? Or are they looking for something else?
I mean, that's a great question. I don't see how you can make up that ground without going after Trump directly and distinguishing yourself. And I don't think a positive message, as hopeful as it is, and as many Republicans wish the party was perhaps headed in that direction overall, will necessarily do that. Because once you're on that debate stage, once you're in the heat of campaign season and we know who's who, many candidates are wondering, what should my strategy be? Should I try not to alienate Trump's base and sort of stay in the mix here, and maybe there's a vice presidential position for me or something in the administration? Or do I take him to task, and am I really running for first place? And I don't think we know the answer yet from candidates like Tim Scott or even his fellow South Carolinian Nikki Haley.
You talk about going after Trump, and one of the candidates who reportedly is doing that directly was Ron DeSantis. We heard about his fundraising call, where he told the top fundraisers that President Trump cannot win. He said that only he can defeat Joe Biden. Will that be something that will gain traction once he announces?
It might. And, you know, Ron DeSantis has gotten a lot of negative attention lately for his 6-week abortion ban or his support for abortion policies of that sort, his feud with Disney, which is highly public. But he's got a lot to run on that's positive as a governor. He dealt with COVID policies in the opposite way that many governors in the country did and got very similar or better outcomes. That's an impressive story to tell, where he can really distinguish himself from the president. So I'm frankly surprised that hasn't been a bigger part of his message. I suspect it will be, especially when other governors, maybe like Chris Sununu, jump into the race. Those are the types of policies conservatives might want to hear about. I would not write off Ron DeSantis yet, but I think he's learning some really early lessons about what it's like to be the front runner, or at least, you know, the alternative to Trump front runner, which he certainly still is.
He seems to be running or grabbing a spot where he can say that I'm Trump, but not Trump. I'm Trump light. Here's a quote that he gave in one of his calls that he's been talking about. He quotes a voter saying, quote, "You know, Trump was somebody we liked his policies, but we didn't like his values. And with you, we like your policies, but we also know that you share our values." He's saying that it certainly is a slam on the former president, but it kind of, does that give him somewhere to run to get the Trump voters to say, I don't have the drama, I don't have the problems, I don't have the indictment, I don't have all that, but I do have his policies, so I'm the alternative?
I mean, sure, on the personal background, yes. And I think actually there'll be a lot more attention lately on Casey DeSantis, who's his very, very committed wife, who's a tremendous resource on the campaign trail, and my research shows that's really important. So there's some ways he can distinguish himself from Trump, but he also needs to get the moderates, and that's the question, is how do you pivot from these ultra-conservative stances on certain social issues to getting people who might have voted for Sununu or might have voted for Nikki Haley or someone who's more toward the middle, because you need to shore those people up to win, too. And then you need to win a national election. And Trump's political antenna on abortion issues, I think, is pretty fine-tuned sometimes.
Yeah, I actually talked yesterday with former President Bill Clinton, and I was reminded that he got 2% of the Iowa caucus, 2%. And the Iowa caucus is not until 8 months from now.
Right.
So, I mean, are we just so early in the forecast here? I mean, that we just don't know.
We are, but on the Republican side, it's a huge field. So Bill Clinton didn't have to beat out this many people. But you're right, Eric. It's early.
All right. Good point. Yeah, you see that. You see that list. I'm like, wow, how about that? 2%. All right, Lauren. Good to see you. Lauren Wright, professor at Princeton.